The idea that these fungi are creating their environment and almost they're the architects of this environment. They're establishing the landscape for all these different creatures and life forms to live is unbelievably fascinating. That the idea that and also that they're connected, right? They're connected in some sort of almost like a neural network. And there's what is that thing in the Pacific Northwest, the one fungus group that's essentially the largest living organism on the face of the earth?
Yeah, the largest organism in the world so far discovered is a mycelial mat, 2,200 acres in size, and that's equivalent to about 665 football fields.
And that's one animal.
It's one mycelial mat.
Thing.
One mycelial mat is a honey mushroom that kills trees. It's an edible mushroom. But think of this. I mean, so for those listeners out there, if any soil biologists know this well, if you go out and get some nice rich soil, a gram of it, and you analyze it, there typically is 5 million microbes per gram in that soil. Now the mycelium is growing out. We have 5 or 6 skin layers that protect us from an infection. The mycelium only has one cell wall. On the other side of that cell wall are hundreds of millions of microbes per gram that are trying to consume it, many of which the mycelium is able to upregulate in constant biomolecular communication with this ecosystem, be able to prevent predators from consuming it, thus allowing it to achieve the largest mass of any organism in the world. This is amazing to me because it means that it is constantly in communication with the ecosystem, being challenged, accepting alliances. So guilds of microbiomes are being created, selected by the mycelium. And these guilds and communities then cooperate in order to prevent pathogens, parasites, even competing guilds from coming into that landscape. So the dominance of these fungi are to ensure the ecosystems that give rise to their progeny. The rule of natural selection in life is reproduction. So everything steers towards reproduction. So from an evolutionary biology point of view, what will that organism do to help survive so it can reproduce? And reproduction through creating guilds of communities of the microbiome using the mycelial network as the structural foundation of the food web seems to be the name of the game here.
So this honey mushroom, is that what it's called?
Yeah.
And that lives in the Pacific Northwest, how is it killing these trees?
It's a root parasite. So it comes in and it kills the trees. And I spend a lot of time in the old growth forest and a lot of hiking. I've always been wondering about meadows in the subalpine regions. There's all these subalpine forests, and then you come out and there's these giant meadows. Well, I suspect that this honey mushroom is a meadow maker. It climaxes these trees, it kills them, they then die, and then they grow saprophytically, but then it clears the canopy so the grasses landscape can grow.
Saprophytically? What is that?
Saprophytic means it's growing on dead material. So first is a parasite.
You mean the mushrooms?
The mushrooms. First is a parasite, kills the tree, then it's a saprophyte, or saprobe is another word for it. It's a decomposer. It breaks down that material. But as it decomposes the wood, 30% of wood becomes water. So the mycelium generates water. Whoa. And so water lenses are being created. Now you have more sunlight, grasses then flourish. And so I suspected that these mushrooms are actually meadow makers, allowing then the elk and the deer and marmots and whatnot to exist in those grassland environments as a way of rebuilding the nitrogen source in the soil. So I think these are over great, huge timescales. We have to get away from the concept of our lifespan, or even 100, 200 years. We need to think in millennial terms, over many, many millennia.
This is unbelievably fascinating. The idea that they're sort of the architects of their ecosystem.
They're the architects of our existence. This is something that there's some really fantastic research that's come out in the past 2 years. I'm a science ambassador for the AAAS, the American Association of Advancement of Science. So I am a little bit out there, but I'm really happy that I have so much scientific support these days, because a lot of things I've been talking about for 20 years are now well-rooted and been proven. One of the things that has been so fascinating to me, and I'm still wrapping my mind around this, but the universe was created about 13.8 billion years ago from the Big Bang. The Earth coalesced out of stardust about 4.5 billion. The earliest records of life we have is about 3.8 billion years ago, single-celled organisms. But just recently in lava beds in South Africa, they found mycelium infused through the lava 2.4 billion years ago. Now, we split from fungi 650 million years ago. And then in Brazil this past year, they found a fully intact, apparently a fossilized mushroom published in Nature, which is a very, very reputable scientific journal. And that one is 1.4 billion years old. So the oldest multicellular organism in the fossil record today is this fungus in lava in South Africa 2.4 billion years ago. A fully formed mushroom who had its form was growing 1.4 billion years ago. We separated from fungi 650 million years ago. Mushrooms have had their form longer than we've had our form by more than 1 billion years.
Here, Jamie just pulled it up on the screen here so we could take a look at it.
The one from Brazil.
So this is the Paul, is this the image that you're familiar with?
Yeah, this is the one that has just been published in the past. They have a great name that's a tongue twister to pronounce. It's Gondwana agaricides magnificus.
Why do they do that? Do they do that to make people like me feel stupid? They don't have to.
No,
I
they
feel
do that
stupid
because
already.
graduate students want to publish papers, and so they can invent names. So.
And so it looks better if you have a long Latin-sounding name.
So, but think of that. Mushrooms had their form before we had ours.
Yeah.
These are elders. These are ancient organisms. These are the overlord underlords of our ecosystem. And I suspect, and as these neural networks, they have more neural connections in the mycelial mass. They're over 1,000 acres than we have in our brain. They are actually accumulating not only genetic intelligence, but I think that as time goes on, I hope that we will be able to interface with them, because I think that there is many benefits of us communicating with mycelium that can give us rapid responses to catastrophia. That's how they've evolved. And we're now the biggest walking catastrophe that I know, walking across the planet. And we need to engage these fungal allies for the benefits that we need to put into play in order to prevent the loss of biodiversity.